Let me just take a moment because I want to speak to the heart of this. You see, when someone in power, someone who holds the pen to write or erase the dreams of millions, looks into a camera and says, "Deal's working out very well," we have to ask for whom. Because it sure as daylight isn't for the farmer in Punjab trying to get his basmati rice across borders. It's not for the tech developer in Bangalore, holding his breath, waiting to see if the code he writes will even matter in a country suddenly building walls taller than understanding. President Donald stood up and said, "There's a trade deal working very well between India and the United States." And then with that same smug certainty, he hints at 20 to 25% tariffs, like he's talking about putting extra gravy on mashed potatoes. Let me tell you something, these are not mashed potatoes. These are people's lives, because behind every number, every percentage point, there is a family, a child going to school, a woman running a textile unit in Delhi, a small business owner in New Jersey importing goods he's worked his whole life to build trust around. And just like that, with a stroke of bravado and a wink to nationalist applause, he threatens to wipe their world out. I get it, I do. Tough talk gets the headlines, bullying gets attention, threats get ratings. But when you lead a nation, you do not lead like a carnival barker at a trade fair. You lead with vision. You lead with heart. You lead with the knowledge that the world is listening. And more importantly, the world is depending on you to do the right thing. Now let's talk about India. A nation of over 1 billion souls, rising, pushing, evolving, a land that has offered America minds, culture, resilience, and partnership, our doctors, our engineers, our students, the very backbone of Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and Main Street. When you talk tariffs, you are not talking strategy. You are talking punishment. You are holding possibility hostage because of pride. And what makes me furious, yes, furious, is that there is no understanding in these words, no empathy, no grasp of global interdependence. It's all about leverage and domination. But here's the thing about domination. It never lasts. Empires built on threats don't stand. They crumble because the soul of the people cannot be bullied forever. Let me tell you what a real deal looks like. A real deal is when both sides win. A real deal is when dignity walks into the room with you and you leave the ego at the door. A real deal is when you sit across the table with a country that's trusted you, a friend, an ally, and you say, "How can we rise together?" Not, "How can I squeeze every last drop out of you before I move on to the next?" And don't come at me with America first, because real leadership understands that in the 21st century, you don't rise by stepping on others. You rise by lifting them with you. This is not the industrial age of smoke and coal and monopoly. This is the age of shared growth, of shared pain, and of shared healing. So, Mr. Trump, let me speak directly to you. Stop playing poker with people's lives. This is not a game. This is not a reality show. There is no cut, no take two, no edited ending where you come out the hero. This is the world, our world, and it's trembling with uncertainty. India is not a pawn. India is a partner to the people of both nations, to every immigrant, every entrepreneur, every student, every family. You are the ones who pay the price for these whims. But don't lose hope, because history does not remember the bully's boast. It remembers the strength of the people who kept standing, kept dreaming, and kept building bridges when others tried to burn them down. There's something chilling about the way he said it, "Deal's working out very well." It was almost casual, like it came from a place of ease, of certainty, of comfort. But you and I both know that when President Trump says those words, they don't come from a place of deep understanding or compassion. They come from a room where silence is purchased and applause is rehearsed. And the truth, my friends, is that these words are not a reflection of the truth. They are a performance, a show, a script designed to mask the reality behind a fog of power and intimidation. Because when someone in that much control, when a man who holds the keys to economic decisions that affect billions, tells us that deals are going very well, we have to ask for whom? Certainly not for the farmer in India who sends spices, rice, and cotton across oceans only to be met with uncertainty. Not for the small business owner in Los Angeles who depends on fair-priced imports to keep her doors open. Not for the student in Mumbai whose dream of studying abroad gets wrapped up in economic tensions she had no part in creating. So I have to say it out loud. Who is this deal really working out for? Because behind that polished smile, behind that rehearsed statement, is a man preparing to impose a 25% tariff, a quarter of the product's value. That's not a tweak, that's not a nudge. That is a gut punch to both sides of the agreement. You don't threaten a friend, you don't squeeze an ally. That's not how respectful partnerships work. That's not how international relations are supposed to be built. But we've seen it before, we've watched the same story play out time and again. Trump stands before cameras, confident in the echo of his own voice, confident that his supporters will cheer not because they understand the policy but because they believe the performance. And that to me is one of the most dangerous parts of this entire situation, because this isn't about facts anymore, this is about optics, it's about how tough he can look, how strong he can sound, even if underneath it all, the very foundation of global cooperation is cracking. Let me tell you, some deal that is working very well does not come with the caveat of economic warfare. It doesn't carry the threat of punishing tariffs. A real deal, one built on fairness, transparency, and shared growth, brings stability, but here we are, once again watching the President of the United States wield power like a club rather than a bridge, watching him hint, suggest, allude, never directly attack, but always ready to strike. What makes this moment particularly heartbreaking is that it comes at a time when the world needs unity. We are more connected than ever before. Our economies are interwoven. Our cultures blend and borrow. Our people travel, trade, learn, and grow together. The United States and India have built decades of partnership through hardship, through transformation, through innovation, and now that relationship is being treated like a used car in a dealer's lot where every negotiation is a hustle and every handshake is followed by a smirk. But let me tell you what I know to be true. Words like working out very well may carry weight on a podium, but they don't carry meaning if the actions behind them are driven by greed, ego, and control. Because we've seen what this administration does when it doesn't get what it wants. It lashes out, it punishes, it places blame, and it does all this while claiming that everything is fine, that the deal is fine, that the partnership is intact. But it isn't. You can't spit in someone's face and then say you're smiling. And what I worry about most is not just what's being said, but what's being normalized. If we let these kinds of statements go unchecked, if we take very well at face value, if we allow leaders to say one thing while preparing to do the opposite, we will lose something vital. We will lose our ability to trust our leaders, to trust our partners, to trust the process that's supposed to protect people, not use them, because trust is not built in headlines, it's built in honesty, and there was nothing honest about that statement. It was carefully crafted, deceptively simple, and it left behind more questions than answers. We deserve more, we deserve clarity, we deserve truth. We deserve leaders who don't dangle threats behind compliments like poisoned sugar cubes. So when Trump says deals working out very well, we must not nod politely. We must not breathe a sigh of relief. We must ask. We must probe. We must challenge. We must look past the curtain and see the stage for what it is. A manipulation of perception meant to distract us from the painful reality that people are about to suffer, that communities will be disrupted, that economies on both sides will hurt. And just when you think you've heard enough, just when you try to catch your breath from the confusion of that hollow reassurance, he does it. He drops the hammer. We might impose a 20 to 25% tariff, he says, like he's reading the lunch menu instead of playing with the livelihoods of millions. He doesn't flinch, doesn't pause, doesn't even soften the blow. And that's when it hits you, these tariffs. They're not just policy, they're punishment. Cold, calculated punishment. dressed up as economic strategy. You see, in the real world, when you raise tariffs that high, it's not just about trade, it's a statement, it's a message that says you didn't play by my rules, and now I'm going to make you feel it. It's not about working together anymore, it's not about building something lasting or fair or even logical. It's about forcing a hand, it's about using power, not to protect, but to intimidate, and that is not what leadership looks like, that's what domination looks like. And domination has never lifted a single soul, it has only broken them. Now let's talk about who actually gets broken when these tariffs go into effect, because it's not the billionaires in boardrooms, it's not the government officials whose pens signed the orders, it's the people. The people. Always the people. It's the family in Gujarat whose textile business depends on exports. It's the entrepreneur in Delhi whose organic products were finally making waves in the US market. It's the single mother in California who sells handcrafted Indian items at her local market stall to support her children. These are the ones who get crushed by tariffs, not the powerful. Tariffs don't fall on spreadsheets, they fall on people, they fall on dreams, and they fall silently, without warning, without remorse, without the voice of those they impact most. Because when you threaten to hike tariffs by 25%, you're not engaging in policy, you're lighting a fire under decades of diplomacy. You're undoing trust that took years, even generations, to build. And for what? To prove a point, to push a narrative, to get applause at a rally. What makes it even more gut-wrenching is how easy it is for him to say it. The words roll off his tongue like they mean nothing. But to the woman in a sari standing in a small village workshop, hand-stitching fabric to be sent across the world, those words mean everything. They mean her shipment won't be accepted. They mean the price will rise beyond reach. They mean her business might close, and she will never know the name of the man who ruined her world. He will never hear her cry. He will never know what he destroyed. And still, they'll call it just business, just business. That cold, empty phrase used to excuse every form of cruelty in the name of profit or profit. But we cannot allow those words to silence our outrage, because when business is used to silence the suffering of the many, it's no longer business, it's oppression. And don't be fooled. This isn't a two-sided attack. This isn't just India's pain. America will bleed too, because every time we slap down a tariff, the price of goods goes up, and the burden, it doesn't fall on the wealthy, it falls on the working class, on the single parent buying clothes, on the family struggling to afford generic medications, on the young entrepreneur sourcing parts from overseas. Tariffs do not isolate suffering, they spread it, quietly, systematically. But here's the part that burns the most. The part that makes me stand up and speak out, is that this was a choice, not a necessity, not a demand of the people. This was a decision born from ego, not me. It was made to show power, not solve problems. It was made by a man who confuses bullying with brilliance, who thinks raising a tariff is the same as raising a nation. It's not, it never was. Real strength is not in the ability to impose. Real strength is in the courage to cooperate, to listen, to create balance. And this was imbalance at its ugliest, a threat disguised as a tool, a negotiation turned into a warning shot, a partnership reduced to a tug of war. And as we sit in this moment, we must ask ourselves, how much longer will we allow these decisions to be made without conscience? How much longer will we accept just business as a reason to destroy lives? Because if tariffs are the weapon, then silence is the accomplice, and we must not stay silent. What makes this entire situation so deeply painful? What twists the knife in the gut of diplomacy is that this wasn't just any country being treated this way. It was India, a nation that has stood by America in moments of uncertainty, a country that has opened its doors, its markets, its culture, not just for profit, but for partnership And now the same India is being talked about as if it were some stubborn vendor on the side of a street market, being pushed, prodded, and threatened into submission by a customer with a louder voice and a bigger wallet. And I'm here to say that is not how you treat a friend. Where India has earned its place, through hardship, through history, through strength. It is a democracy that has navigated colonization, wars, poverty, and division, and still rose with books in children's hands and satellites in space. It is a nation that has offered its best and brightest to the world, from scientists to scholars, doctors to developers, artists to activists. And yes, it has contributed to American greatness, not in small ways, but in big, foundational, transformative ways. So when President Trump, standing tall on some platform of presumed superiority, hints at levying 25% tariffs as if he's scolding a disobedient partner, I want to ask him directly, do you even understand who you are talking to? Do you understand the depth of respect, of dignity, of tradition you are dismissing in a single breath? Because India is not some pawn on your chessboard of global gamesmanship. India is a force. It is a soul. It is a civilization older than your sound bites and stronger than your ego. The arrogance, yes, I'll say it, the arrogance of threatening India like it has no say, no power, no identity beyond what America allows it to have, is not just ignorant, it is insulting, it is dangerous. It sends a message to every other nation watching that America no longer values its partners, it only values leverage. And in that kind of world, trust dies, collaboration dies, because no one wants to walk beside a bully. They just wait for the moment to walk away. Let me tell you what real partnership looks like. It looks like two nations shoulder to shoulder facing the future. It looks like cultural exchange, educational programs, shared environmental solutions, technological breakthroughs, mutual defense and peacekeeping efforts that cross oceans and erase borders. That's the India-America relationship we should be celebrating, not gambling it away over trade tantrums. I think about the Indian Americans who contribute to this country in ways far beyond the boardroom, who serve as nurses, teachers, engineers, civil rights attorneys, who raise their children with values of respect and hard work, who fly both flags in their hearts. What does it say to them when the country they now call home speaks of the one they left behind with disdain, with threats, with transactional coldness? What does it say to the young Indian girl watching the news with her grandfather in Mumbai, hearing the President of the United States speak of her nation like a bargaining chip? It tells her her identity is negotiable. It tells her her pride is conditional. And that is where the damage cuts the deepest, not in the deals, not in the dollars, but in the dignity that gets stripped away in plain sight. India deserves better, not because it is fragile, but because it is strong, and strength deserves respect, not. India doesn't need America's charity, but it does deserve America's honesty, its respect, its sincerity, because anything less is not partnership, it's posturing. And posturing doesn't build bridges, it burns them. We are living in a moment where alliances must be protected, not played with, where mutual respect must be the anchor, not the afterthought. And if America continues down this road speaking softly while holding a stick of tariffs behind its back, it will not just lose trade, it will lose something far more valuable, its reputation as a nation that honors its friend. Once that trust is broken, it doesn't come back easy. Trust, like glass, once shattered may be pieced back together, but the cracks will always show. India has been patient, generous, strategic, but it is also wise. It sees the games being played. And the people of India, with all their history, all their pride, and all their grace, will not be reduced to pawns in someone else's power play. This is not about money, this is about mutual dignity, and dignity cannot be measured in tariff percentage. It can only be felt in how we treat one another, even when we disagree, especially when we disagree. And here's what we cannot afford to ignore. This is not just India's problem. This is not just a distant ripple on a foreign shore. No, this tariff threat, this looming shadow of economic punishment will not stop at India's border. It will not wrap itself up neatly in red tape and disappear once the headlines fade, because the pain that begins over there ends up right here. It shows up on our shelves, in our small businesses, in our neighborhoods, in our lives. And this is what people need to understand. American workers, American families, American consumers will pay the price too. Tariffs are like a boomerang. You throw them with force, thinking you've hit your target only to feel the sting on your own back when it returns. When Trump talks about raising tariffs on Indian goods, he acts like he's delivering a blow to some distant entity. He talks like it's some punishment for India not falling in line, like it's a lesson to be taught. But let's pull back the curtain, because it's not just Indian exporters who will suffer, it's the American importer in Houston trying to restock his stores. It's the mom in New York who can't afford the now expensive medicine that used to come from an Indian pharmaceutical company. It's the entrepreneur in Chicago who relies on Indian materials to create products that power her dream. Tariffs may seem like a political weapon, but in truth they're attacks that hits the everyday citizen the hardest. And what's most heartbreaking is that most of these people, these innocent men and women caught in the crossfire, had no say in this. They didn't ask for this fight. They didn't start this war. They didn't threaten anyone. They're just trying to live, trying to build something, trying to survive in a world that already feels uncertain enough. Let's talk about healthcare. You know where a significant portion of America's affordable generic drugs come from. India, life-saving medicines, cancer treatments, diabetes medication, antibiotics. And if a 25% tariff goes into effect, the cost of those medications rises. Insurance doesn't always cover it. And who will it hit the hardest? The poor, the elderly, the underinsured, the people who are already struggling to afford the pills that keep them alive. This isn't some minor shift in trade dynamics. This is life and death. And the fact that this possibility was tossed out there so casually, without even an acknowledgement of the human toll, is not just irresponsible, it's immoral. But let's keep going. Let's talk about the impact on small business. So many of our local stores, our corner shops, our online entrepreneurs, they rely on Indian imports, not because they're cutting corners, but because they've built honest, ethical partnerships that help both sides grow. These aren't big corporations hoarding billions. These are hard-working families who depend on access to global goods to keep their lights on. You think a 25% spike in import costs doesn't matter? It does. It means fewer shipments, less stock, higher prices, customers who turn away, employees who get laid off, dreams that slowly die. And what does it do to trust? What does it do to the spirit of innovation and cooperation when you wake up one day and realize the rules just changed because someone needed a win in the news cycle? Because that's what this really is, a political ploy, an empty chest-beating moment designed to show dominance instead of deliver progress. That is not how you lead a country. That's how you run a reality show. And while we're on that subject, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the presidency is not a performance. The Oval Office is not a stage, and trade negotiations are not plot twists to get ratings up. These are real people's lives. These are their jobs, their medicine, their families' futures. They deserve more than being reduced to leverage in a high-stakes blow. Because this country, our country, is better than that. We are better than that. We've always been at our best when we looked outward, when we partnered, when we reached across oceans not to demand, but to understand. And when we allow one man's ego to upend those values, we are not just hurting other nations, we are tearing at the fabric of who we are supposed to be. We can't afford to act like this is someone else's problem. It's already ours. The impact is already. And if we do not stand up and say, no, this is not right, then we are co-signing the suffering of our neighbors, both near and far. This isn't about policy anymore. It's about people. It's about protecting the unseen, the unheard, the ones who always pay the price when power is misused. And if America wants to call itself a beacon of hope, a land of opportunity, a global leader, then it has to act like one, not with force, but with fairness, not with arrogance, but with compassion, because anything else is not just a loss in trade, it's a loss in character. At this point, we have to stop pretending this is about economics. We have to call it what it is. This isn't a trade strategy. It's not a policy negotiation. It's ego, raw, unchecked, loud, and blinding ego. Because when President Trump stands before the press and says the deal is going very well, while hinting at a 25% tariff in the same breath, he's not offering a vision for growth. He's playing a game. He's throwing down a gauntlet to remind the world that he wants to win, no matter the cost. And let's be honest, this isn't about countries anymore, it's about him. This is a pattern we've seen too many times. Every decision, every policy, every so-called deal is less about what's good for the people and more about what's good for the press conference, for the next rally, for the next tweet. It's all theater, a performance meant to keep the spotlight where he wants it. He's not measuring impact, he's measuring applause. He's not building bridges, he's building moments. And the tragedy is that while he's chasing moments, people are losing years, years of hard work, years of building international ties, years of cultivating trust across borders, all torn down in one interview soundbite. And let's speak honestly, when ego leads, reason disappears, empathy disappears, facts become optional. What remains is a hunger for control, a desire to prove superiority, to be seen as the one who dictated the terms, who dominated the room, who won the conversation. That's not diplomacy, that's not leadership, that's emotional insecurity masquerading as strength. It's pride with a suit and a microphone. Do you know what real strength looks like? It looks like humility. It looks like saying, we don't agree, but let's keep talking. It looks like choosing cooperation over coercion. It looks like knowing that just because you can threaten someone doesn't mean you should. Real strength doesn't need to remind the world how powerful it is. Real strength is quiet, consistent, thoughtful, measured. It does not hurl threats and call them solutions. It does not toss around the livelihoods of millions like poker chips on a table. This tariff threat, let's be clear, it's not an economic maneuver, it's a symbol, it's meant to show India and the world that Trump holds the power, that if you don't fall in line, he'll make it hurt. But that is not negotiation, that is manipulation. That is what happens when ego becomes the driver and policy becomes the... And I want to speak to the emotional impact of that, because when a leader behaves this way, it doesn't just hurt economies, it wounds identities. It sends a message to every Indian citizen, to every Indian American, that their country is a problem to be managed, not a partner to be embraced, that they must prove their worth, earn their place, submit to the conditions of a larger, louder nation. That's the kind of message that lingers, that sinks in. That tells a whole generation that they are less than, that their country can be talked down to, leveraged and shoved aside without consequence. And the worst part, it's not even personal to him. That's what makes it so common. These words, these threats, these games, they're not born from careful analysis or national interest. They're not made with you or me or our families in mind. They're just tools to help him win his battle, to help him look like the strongest man in the room. And while he poses for the cameras, people are losing their jobs, families are choosing between groceries and prescriptions, businesses are shutting down because they can't afford a 25% hike on their goods. That's not strength, that's selfishness. And I say this with every ounce of passion in my heart. We have got to stop confusing loudness with leadership. They are not the same. We have got to stop mistaking intimidation for intelligence. And we have got to stop thinking that winning a headline is worth sacrificing a friendship that took decades to build. India is not just another country on a trade list. India is a partner, a friend, a culture that has enriched the world and America in countless ways. And when we let ego dictate how we treat our friends, we become unworthy of them. We become blind to their value, deaf to their voice, and ignorant of their contributions. So let's be clear, this was not a calculated policy decision. It was a performance, a scripted moment meant to make one man look strong while making millions of others feel small. And we as citizens of the world, as people who believe in dignity, fairness and truth, we must say no more. We must not let ego write policy. We must not let pride drive progress off the rail, because the price of these empty victories is too high, and the people who pay it are always the ones whose voices are never heard in that room. And now we arrive at the moment where we must ask ourselves, what now? After all the talk of tariffs and deals, threats and ego, we're left not with a stronger alliance, but with a fracture, a wound, a silence between two great nations that were once building something beautiful together. And the question we must all ask is this: how do we repair the damage when leadership chooses division over dialogue? Because let's be honest, when President Trump stood there and said the deal is working out very well, even as he dangled the threat of a 20 to 25% tariff like a sword over India's economy, what he was really doing was redefining the terms of friendship. He was telling us that in his world, respect is transactional, loyalty is conditional, and power is measured by how much pain you can inflict, not by how much peace you can preserve. But that's not the world I believe in. That's not the world I want to leave behind for the next generation. And I know deep in my spirit that is not the world the people of America or the people of India deserve. You see, when you threaten a friend, you break something far more sacred than a contract. You break the silent understanding that even when we disagree, we honor each other, we listen, we come to the table not to dominate, but to learn, to collaborate, to uplift. That's what the US-India relationship was built on. Not just shared trade routes or defense agreements, but shared values, the belief in democracy, in innovation, in human dignity. And when a single man, no matter how powerful, chooses to treat that relationship as a bargaining chip for political gain, it insults not just a nation, it insults a legacy built by millions of immigrants who crossed oceans with hope in their eyes, who built lives, built families, built bridges between two countries that are more alike than we ever give them credit for. It's those people, not the politicians, who suffer the consequences of these careless threats. It's the small business owner in Mumbai who exports handmade goods to the US, wondering if his profits will vanish overnight. It's the engineer in Bengaluru whose company works with American firms, fearing the ripple effects of instability. It's the young student in New York who's building her future on a visa, now watching both countries grow cold to each other. These are not statistics. These are people with dreams, with families, with a stake in this global story. So I ask you, how long will we allow one man's insecurity to determine the destiny of nations? We must speak out. We must rise above the noise and say, this is not who we are. We do not bully our allies. We do not gamble with people's future. We do not use power as a weapon. We use it as a responsibility. We lead not through fear, but through faith in one another. We build not through threats, but through trust. And above all, we remember that leadership is not about being the loudest in the room. It is about being the wise. This moment right here, right now, is bigger than a trade deal. It is a test of our integrity as a global community. It's a test of whether we allow short-term politics to destroy long-term partnerships, whether we let arrogance rewrite the values that bind, whether we continue to operate from a place of fear, or whether we finally decide to lead from a place of compassion, courage, and collaboration. I'm angry, yes I am, because I see how recklessness can unravel decades of progress in a single breath. But I'm also hopeful because I know there is a world beyond this one voice. There are millions more American voices, Indian voices, human voices who want something better, who know that in the face of division, we can choose unity, that in the face of threats, we can choose diplomacy, and in the face of manipulation, we can choose to hold our leaders accountable, not just for what they say, but for what their words destroy. So let this be the turning point. Let this be the moment where we say, enough of the games, enough of the posture, enough of the divide and conquer politics that leave our people hurting and our partnerships broken. Let us demand more from those who claim to lead us. Let us raise our voices, not in anger alone, but in conviction, in clarity, in truth. Because this isn't just about a tariff, it's about the soul of our international relationships, it's about the moral compass of our leadership, and it's about whether we choose to be better, to do better, even when it's hard. Mr. Trump may think deals are about leverage, but I believe they're about legacy. And I pray with every fiber of my being that we choose to leave behind a legacy of dignity, of respect, and of partnership that no tariff and no man can ever take away.